always believed that no matter how difficult life became, my family would never betray me. Looking back now, I realize I ignored every warning sign. I'm 28 years old, and until recently, I had what most people would call a normal life. I worked as a financial analyst for a mid-sized company. The pay wasn't incredible, but it was stable. I lived in a small apartment, drove an 8-year-old car, and spent almost nothing on myself. Every extra dollar went into savings. My dream wasn't expensive. I just wanted to buy a small house before I turned 30. Growing up, my parents always reminded me that I was the oldest child. You're the responsible one. Your brother looks up to you. Family always comes first. I heard those words so often that they became part of who I was. My younger brother Ryan was the complete opposite. He was charming, funny, confident. Everyone loved him, but he also made terrible decisions. He dropped out of college twice, started businesses without planning, borrowed money from friends, quit jobs after only a few months. No matter what happened, my parents defended him. He's just finding himself. Everyone makes mistakes. He'll succeed eventually. Whenever Ryan needed money, they came to me. The first time, it was for tuition. I emptied half my savings. The second time, it was to help him open an online business. That failed within 6 months. Then he wanted money for another business. I said no. For the first time in my life, I said no. My parents were furious. My mother cried. My father accused me of abandoning my own brother. Ryan barely spoke to me for months. Eventually, everyone acted like nothing had happened. I thought the worst was behind us. I was wrong. 2 years later, I accepted a promotion in another city. It meant longer hours, but nearly double the salary. I packed everything I owned into my old car and started over. The distance gave me peace. For the first time in years, nobody called asking for money every week. I focused on work, saved aggressively, cooked every meal at home, skipped vacations, ignored expensive hobbies. By the end of my 3rd year there, I had saved enough for a down payment on my dream home. I remember sitting at my kitchen table one Sunday morning, coffee in one hand, laptop open, looking at houses online. I actually smiled. After years of sacrificing for everyone else, I was finally building something for myself. That's when my phone rang. Unknown number. Normally I ignored those calls. Something told me to answer. Hello? A calm woman's voice replied. Good morning. Am I speaking with Mr. Ethan Carter? Yes. I'm calling from the mortgage servicing department regarding your overdue payments. I laughed. I'm sorry, I think you've got the wrong person. She paused. Then she read my full legal name, my date of birth, my social security information. Everything matched perfectly. The smile disappeared from my face. I'm sorry, I whispered. What mortgage? There was another pause. The property located on Oak Ridge Lane. I'd never heard that address before. I don't own any property. The representative sounded confused. Our records indicate you're the primary borrower. I felt my heart racing. There has to be some mistake. She apologized politely and suggested I request a complete copy of the loan documents. After hanging up, I couldn't move. My hands were shaking. I convinced myself it had to be identity theft. Someone must have stolen my information. There was no other explanation. I left work early that afternoon. The bank emailed me copies of the mortgage paperwork. I opened the first page. There was my name, my address, my identification number, my signature, or something that looked almost exactly like my signature. Every page carried it. I kept scrolling. Loan amount, $75,000. Property owner, my parents. I stared at the screen for what felt like hours. My parents had bought a house using my identity, without telling me, without asking me, without my permission, and according to the bank, they had already stopped making payments 3 months ago. The debt was now legally connected to me. At that moment, I realized my biggest nightmare wasn't identity theft. It was my own family. I didn't sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the loan documents, my name, my signature, my parents' house. None of it made sense. I kept asking myself the same question. How could they do this? The next morning I called my mother. She answered on the second ring. "Hi, sweetheart." Her voice sounded completely normal, like nothing had happened. I took a deep breath. "Mom, did you and Dad buy a house using my name?" There was complete silence for almost 10 seconds. Then she quietly said, "We were going to tell you." My stomach dropped. "So it's true?" She sighed. "It wasn't supposed to happen like this." I could barely control my anger. "You forged my signature." "It wasn't forgery," she replied quickly. "We're family." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "Mom, that's a crime." Before she could answer, my father took the phone. His voice was cold. "You need to calm down." "No," I said. "You need to explain." He didn't apologize, not once. Instead, he started explaining how difficult things had been. Ryan's latest business had failed again. The family had too many debts. They couldn't qualify for another mortgage, but my credit score was excellent. "The bank approved everything because of your financial history," he said. I felt sick. "So you stole my identity because I had good credit?" "We didn't steal anything. It's the family home. One day it'll belong to you anyway." I couldn't believe the excuses. "You never asked me. You would have said no." He answered without hesitation. That sentence hurt more than anything else. They knew it was wrong. They simply believed their needs mattered more than my permission. Then my father said something I'll never forget. "You're the oldest son. This is your responsibility." I hung up. I couldn't listen anymore. For the next 2 days, I spoke to lawyers, my bank, and the mortgage company. Every conversation became worse because the signatures looked convincing, because some documents had been notarized, because the payments had been made for almost a year before stopping. Proving fraud wasn't going to be simple. One lawyer looked me straight in the eye. "You have 2 choices. You can report your parents for fraud, or you can accept responsibility for the loan." I didn't sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the loan documents, my name, my signature, my parents' house. None of it made sense. I kept asking myself the same question. How could they do this? The next morning I called my mother. She answered on the second ring. "Hi, sweetheart." Her voice sounded completely normal, like nothing had happened. I took a deep breath. "Mom, did you and Dad buy a house using my name?" There was complete silence for almost 10 seconds. Then she quietly said, "We were going to tell you." My stomach dropped. "So it's true?" She sighed. "It wasn't supposed to happen like this." I could barely control my anger. "You forged my signature." "It wasn't forgery," she replied quickly. "We're family." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "Mom, that's a crime." Before she could answer, my father took the phone. His voice was cold. "You need to calm down." "No," I said. "You need to explain." He didn't apologize, not once. Instead, he started explaining how difficult things had been. Ryan's latest business had failed again. The family had too many debts. They couldn't qualify for another mortgage, but my credit score was excellent. "The bank approved everything because of your financial history," he said. I felt sick. "So you stole my identity because I had good credit?" "We didn't steal anything. It's the family home. One day it'll belong to you anyway." I couldn't believe the excuses. "You never asked me. You would have said no." He answered without hesitation. That sentence hurt more than anything else. They knew it was wrong. They simply believed their needs mattered more than my permission. Then my father said something I'll never forget. "You're the oldest son. This is your responsibility." I hung up. I couldn't listen anymore. For the next 2 days, I spoke to lawyers, my bank, and the mortgage company. Every conversation became worse because the signatures looked convincing, because some documents had been notarized, because the payments had been made for almost a year before stopping. Proving fraud wasn't going to be simple. One lawyer looked me straight in the eye. "You have 2 choices. You can report your parents for fraud, or you can accept responsibility for the loan." Neither option felt real. If I reported them, they could face criminal charges. If I didn't, my financial future could be destroyed. I spent hours staring at my phone, unable to decide. Then Ryan called. I answered immediately. He laughed. "Mom says you're making a huge deal out of this." I couldn't believe it. A huge deal? My credit is ruined. "My name is on a $75,000 mortgage." He sounded annoyed. "It's just paperwork. It's not like you're actually paying." I almost laughed. The bank disagrees. He became serious. "Look, my business is finally improving. Once things get better, we'll catch up on the payments." I asked him one simple question. "Have you paid even $1 toward this mortgage?" Silence. That was my answer. He hadn't paid anything. He had simply expected me to clean up another disaster, just like always. I ended the call. That evening, I drove 4 hours back to my hometown. I needed to see the house with my own eyes. When I pulled into the driveway, I froze. The house wasn't small. It wasn't some emergency purchase. It was a beautiful 2-story home with a large front yard, a new SUV parked outside, and expensive renovations that clearly weren't cheap. This wasn't about survival. This was about living beyond their means, using my identity to make it possible. I walked to the front door. Before I could knock, the door opened. My mother smiled nervously, as if I had simply come over for dinner. But I wasn't there as a son anymore. I was there as the victim of the biggest betrayal of my life. My mother stepped aside and quietly said, "Come in." I walked through the front door, looking around in disbelief. Hardwood floors, brand new furniture, a huge television mounted on the wall, an expensive kitchen that looked like it belonged in a luxury home magazine. This wasn't a family struggling to survive. This was a family living a lifestyle they couldn't afford. My father sat at the dining table with his arms crossed. Ryan was leaning against the kitchen counter, scrolling through his phone as if none of this concerned him. No one apologized, not one person. My father finally spoke. "Sit down." I stayed where I was. "I'm not here for dinner. I'm here for the truth." He sighed. "We already told you everything." "No," I replied. "You told me excuses. I want to know exactly who came up with this plan." The room went silent. Then Ryan shrugged. "It was Dad's idea." My father immediately snapped back. "It was for the family." Ryan pointed at him. "You said he'd never find out if we kept making payments." I looked at my father. His face had turned pale. So this hadn't been some desperate last-minute decision. They had planned it from the beginning. I pulled the loan documents out of my bag and placed them on the table. "Who forged my signature?" No one answered. I asked again. "Who signed my name?" My mother burst into tears. My father looked away. Ryan quietly muttered, "It was a guy Dad knew." Those 6 words hit harder than anything else. They hadn't just lied. They had involved someone else in committing fraud. I felt my hands shaking. "You hired someone to fake my signature?" My father stood up. "Lower your voice." "No, this is my life, my future, my credit. For years I sacrificed everything for this family. And this is how you repay me?" My mother tried to grab my hand. "We were going to tell you eventually." I stepped back. "When? After the house was paid off? Or after the bank came after me?" No one answered. Ryan suddenly rolled his eyes. "You're acting like we're strangers. We're family." I stared at him. "You've never paid me back for anything. I helped with college. I helped with your businesses. I helped every single time. And when I finally said no, you stole my identity." Ryan's expression changed. "We didn't steal it. We borrowed it." I couldn't believe those words had actually come out of his mouth. Borrowed it. A $75,000 mortgage wasn't something you borrowed without asking. I reached into my pocket and placed another piece of paper on the table. It was the lawyer's business card. I spoke to an attorney. The room instantly became tense. My mother started crying again. My father looked angry. Ryan suddenly looked nervous for the first time. Dad pointed at me. "You wouldn't actually report your own family." I looked him straight in the eyes. "I haven't decided yet, but after today, it's becoming easier." As I turned to leave, my father shouted one last sentence. "If you go to the police, don't ever call us your family again." I stopped walking. Without turning around, I answered quietly, "Family doesn't do this to each other." Then I walked out. I got into my car and drove away. Halfway home, my phone buzzed. A notification from my bank. "Credit alert. New collection activity reported." I pulled over immediately. My hands were shaking as I logged into my account. Another missed mortgage payment had been reported. My credit score had dropped nearly 120 points overnight. Everything I had spent years building was falling apart. And at that moment, I realized this nightmare was only getting started. "There is good news," he said. I looked at him hopefully. "If you truly never signed these papers, this is fraud." But he paused. "You'll need to cooperate with a police investigation." I sat in my car for almost an hour, staring at the credit alert on my phone. A few months earlier, my credit score had been excellent. Now it had dropped so much that the mortgage pre-approval for my own house was canceled. Years of hard work destroyed by one decision I never made. The next morning, I met my lawyer again. He spread all the documents across his desk. "And your parents, your brother, and anyone else involved could face criminal charges." I closed my eyes. This wasn't what I wanted. I didn't want revenge. I wanted my life back. My lawyer looked at me carefully. "You've spent your entire life protecting your family. Now you need to protect yourself." For the first time, I realized he was right. That afternoon, I filed an official fraud report. The detective assigned to the case listened quietly as I explained everything. When I finished, he asked only one question. Do you have any messages where they admitted using your identity? I remembered the phone calls, the conversations. Then I remembered something else. My father had sent me several text messages after I left their house. I opened my phone. One message read, "We only did it because we knew you'd never help us otherwise." Another said, "Please don't destroy this family over a house." The detective nodded. "Save every message. They may become important evidence." 2 days later, my phone rang again. This time, it was my mother. She was crying. "The police came to the house. They're asking questions." I stayed silent. She whispered, "Please, stop this." I finally answered. "I asked for one thing, the truth. You chose lies." She started apologizing. It was the first real apology I'd heard, but it came only after the investigation had begun, not before. A few hours later, Ryan called. His voice was completely different. No confidence, no arrogance. "Ethan, I'm sorry. I never thought it would go this far." I asked him, "When exactly were you planning to tell me?" He had no answer. Instead, he said something that confirmed everything. "Dad told me you'd never report us because you care too much." I laughed quietly. That's exactly why he thought he could get away with it. A week later, the investigation uncovered something even worse. The forged mortgage wasn't the only document. My parents had also used my personal information to apply for 2 credit cards. Together, they owed nearly $18,000. I felt sick. This wasn't one bad decision. It was a pattern. For years, they had been using my identity whenever they needed money, and I had never known. The detective looked at me and said, "This case is much bigger than we first believed." At that moment, I knew there was no going back. The people I had spent my whole life protecting had been secretly destroying my future all along. The investigation lasted almost 4 months. Those were the longest months of my life. Every week, detectives asked for more documents, bank statements, old emails, text messages, phone records. I cooperated with them, not because I wanted to hurt my family, but because I refused to lose my future for a crime I didn't commit. Eventually, the truth came out. The signature on the mortgage documents was fake. The notary had ignored proper identity verification. The 2 credit card applications had also been submitted using my personal information without my knowledge. The evidence was overwhelming. The bank officially removed my name from the mortgage. The fraudulent accounts were closed. Over the next few months, the negative marks on my credit report were corrected. My credit score slowly recovered. It wasn't instant, but for the first time in months, I felt like I could breathe again. My parents weren't as fortunate. The bank demanded immediate repayment of the mortgage. Without my name attached to the loan, they no longer qualified to keep the house. A few months later, the house was sold. They had to move into a much smaller apartment. Ryan's latest business also collapsed. Without someone else paying his bills, reality caught up with him. One evening, nearly a year after everything began, I received a handwritten letter from my mother. She admitted they had convinced themselves that they were borrowing my future to save their own. She wrote that every lie became easier after the first one. She apologized for choosing convenience over honesty. I read the letter twice, then I folded it and placed it in a drawer. I forgave her in my heart. But forgiveness didn't mean pretending nothing had happened. I never moved back. I never shared another bank account. I never signed another document for anyone. I learned that trust, once broken, is incredibly difficult to rebuild. 2 years later, I finally bought the house I had always dreamed of. It wasn't the biggest house in the neighborhood, but every payment came from my own hard work. Every key belonged to me. The day I moved in, I stood in the empty living room for several minutes. No expensive furniture, no decorations, just silence. For the first time in years, that silence felt peaceful. A few weeks later, Ryan sent me a message. "I finally understand why you walked away. I spent years expecting you to fix my mistakes. I should have been the brother you deserved." I didn't reply immediately. After thinking about it for a long time, I sent only one sentence. "I hope you become the person you just described." That was enough. Sometimes, the greatest act of love isn't sacrificing everything for your family. Sometimes, it's refusing to let them destroy your future.